Uh, Mr. Kutsch, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. Could you please introduce yourself and so that the audience knows that you are somebody who should be listened to when it comes to nuclear energy?
Okay, good. I've been the executive director for the Thorium Energy Alliance for the past 13, geez, I wish, 15 years. We've been, we first started working with thorium back in about 2005. And since then, we decided that uh, thorium is such a missed opportunity in the world of nuclear fuels, but also critical materials and advanced materials, and also uh, an extreme uh, bottleneck to advancing rare earth production and other critical material adoption in the West, uh, that we needed to do something. So we started Thorium Energy Alliance 15 years ago, and because of that, uh, we have become uh, I'm a little modest, but our organization has probably access to all the world's experts outside of China on how to use thorium as a fuel, how to regulate it, and how to use thorium as an advanced material in everything from metals and ceramics and catalysts to nuclear medicines and optics. And so I don't know if anybody should listen to what I have to say, but they'd probably be pretty well served if they did listen because we offer a lot of opportunity to solve a lot of the world's issues in terms of resources and energy and opportunity and abundance that we could get if we started utilizing thorium instead of just throwing it away.
So, is it fair to say that you're in the business of developing nuclear reactors?
Well, what I mostly do and the organization does is help other people develop nuclear reactors, and then there's companies like Clean Core Thorium Energy who are trying to develop a nuclear fuel, and then companies like Copenhagen Atomics that are trying to do both, develop a nuclear reactor and a new type of nuclear fuel. So uh, we are like a resource for other people, but we don't have our own reactor design. We don't have our own, we are agnostic as to, the technologies. We just help other organizations develop their technologies as best as they can. We also obviously a big part of what we do is we try and find resources for other organizations. So nuclear fuel, as you can imagine, is not very easy to find. And there's only a handful of places on Earth where you can legally access things like thorium metal or uranium metal or plutonium or spent nuclear fuel. So uh, that's what we spend a lot of our time doing, is trying to find resources for other people.
Yet, thorium, if my memory serves me correctly, is used in some welding rods and is used in microwave ovens.
Yep,
And so there is thorium in practically every house in the Western world. Is this
yeah.
correct?
Yeah. So there's still a lot of uses for thorium. There used to be hundreds and hundreds of uses. Uh, Companies like Dow and W.R. Grace used to make a lot of catalysts with thorium for cracking methane, natural gas, into ethylene plastics, things like that. So there used to be lots of industrial uses, but over time, the USA and the International Atomic Energy Organization and others basically made it really hard to work with source material. And that's a term for things that are radioactive. And so basically, they just made it more and more and more difficult and restrictive to work with these materials. And so people said, well, let's just use the next best thing. So, but there is no other next best thing when it comes to things like tungsten welding rods, microwaves, radar systems. actinium-225, the world's greatest metastatic cancer medicine known to man, only is created by thorium. So, we need to revive these technologies. We've stupidly hurt ourselves for like the last 40 plus years by shelving all these technologies that had such incredible promise to make things better and more efficient and stronger and heat resistant and all the rest.
By the way, I'm talking to you today thanks to nuclear to radio treatment of cancer.
Good.
True, I was not treated with thorium. It was some isotope of cobalt, if I remember correctly. It was many years ago. But still, every time people are scared of radiation, I surprise them by saying, I'm alive today thanks to radiation.
Yeah, good. Very good. That's a
And,
great
and, and,
example.
they're, and they're shocked to hear that because radiation in their mind is something deadly. This is
Yeah.
how the public associates, this is what the public associates radiation with. But I want to talk about something else, please. Can nuclear energy be the cheapest form of energy?
Oh, it absolutely can. And behind the when you look at what it costs for maintaining even an old light water reactor, even a even a legacy light water reactor, uh, it, the maintenance costs and OpEx operating costs is nothing. It's 2 cents a kilowatt hour, right? So that's a very, very low amount of money. Usually uh, they charge in Illinois, United States, where I'm at, we pay about 10, 11 cents a kilowatt hour. So before you add taxes and transmission costs and all these other costs that they add on to a bill here in Illinois, and the rest of the world, the actual generating cost of a light water reactor is about 2.5 cents, certainly under 3 cents. So that's called behind the meter cost, right? That's why you see all these Bitcoin operations and AI people wanting to locate next to a nuclear power plant because they want that 2 cents kilowatt generation cost. So everybody knows that nuclear is the most stable. It's available 95 to 99% of the time, where solar is, only available 20% of the time. Wind is maybe available 25, 30% of the time. So the fact that nuclear is stable, base load, always on, and cheap, so you're not worried about your power going out every time the sun sets. All that makes it by far the most reliable and cheap. Reliability equals cheapness, right? So it's like, if you have an unreliable intermittent energy source, what's cheap? Even if you got that power for free for a couple hours a day, what good is it? What good is it for the other 20 hours a day? You still have to go back to some other energy source. So let's just stick with nuclear, which is already the cheapest, safest, most reliable baseload energy we have by a lot.
So it turns out that the one energy source that releases no pollutants in the environment, nuclear,
Right.
that releases no CO2, also happens to be the cheapest. It's cheaper than coal, cheaper than oil, cheaper than natural gas, cheaper than solar, cheaper than hydro, cheaper than wind. Is this correct?
Yeah, it's absolutely. And the newer advanced reactors that are coming out, that China is developing, that are being developed throughout the world, will be even cheaper. You're talking about 1 cent per kilowatt. Now, the what happens is, the capex, the capital investment to put out a gigawatt, 1,000 megawatts of power from a nuclear power plant gets burdened by insane amounts of no other industry would allow itself to be regulated the way the nuclear industry is, right? No medical device manufacturer, no chemical company, no airline. No, you can't name an industry that would put up with what the nuclear industry puts up with. A lot of people cry about overregulation and burdens. Nobody in the nuclear industry has ever complained that uh, where it should. And you have ridiculous things like LNT, the radiation exposure, as you were talking about, for a nuclear worker is barely above background. So if you brought, if if for instance, if you were exposed, if you got your cancer treatment, you wouldn't be allowed to work at the nuclear plant anymore because you'd be more radioactive than the nuclear plant itself. Right. So the limits on. I had a guy at the airport. I just flew in from El Salvador. El Salvador is very smart. The government there wants to deploy civilian nuclear for this very reason. They're already 85% renewable. They're hydro. They got a lot of hydroelectric. They've got a lot of geothermal. They've got solar. They got a little bit of wind. They're already 80. That's the dream of every, German bureaucrat and green environmentalist. 85% renewable energy, and that's all they have. So they know if they want to ever lift their people out of poverty, and provide them with prosperity and abundance, they have to go with nuclear. And so they're trying to develop advanced nuclear power using thorium so that nobody in the world thinks they're trying to make weapons. Thorium has the advantage that it's proliferation. You can't make a bomb from thorium. So this is an example of a country that has understood that it's cheap, it's reliable, it's inherently safe to build nuclear power plants. Whereas in the United States, or God forbid, Germany, uh, there's all these countries that have burdened nuclear with insane amounts of regulation that, like a stupid mule, nuclear is so profitable and so cheap that they're like, fine, put all this stuff on our backs like a giant turtle. We'll carry the world on our backs. They hate, and that's come from the world of coal and natural gas and, supposedly environmentalists who want this burden on there. Otherwise, they know in a fair fight, nuclear would displace all these other energy systems, so they have to make it artificially expensive to deal with nuclear.
So the government and ironically, the environmentalists do their best to stifle the only source of energy that can solve the global warming for no extra cost. Is this correct to say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an environmentalist. I have a farm. I need to keep it healthy. I have young relatives that I want to see grow up and have prosperous lives. I want you to be successful. And why do I do this? I endlessly talk about prosperity and abundance, whereas environmentalists, at least a certain amount of them, very disingenuous ones, are either working for natural gas and coal, to sideline realistic solutions to our energy needs, or they've deceived themselves in this sad cycle of fear. And it's just fear and fear and fear that makes them, oh, you're going to put nuclear waste out in the environment that'll be radioactive for 10,000 years. And it's like, well, let me tell you, one, no, we're not. We know where every microgram of spent nuclear fuel is. And if you let us, which they don't, but if you let us, we could recycle nuclear waste and reuse it. We have sitting in the parking lots of nuclear reactors in the United States 300 years of nuclear energy just sitting there. If we were allowed to reprocess that waste, we could reuse it over and over and over again. But even if you store it in a cask, so what? Nobody's going to steal this material. No one's going to make a bomb out of it. We know where every microgram of it is. And let me tell you, your solar cells are made with the most toxic heavy metals imaginable. And those solar cells are going to be poisonous forever,
Yeah,
right?
there's
The
cadmium,
cadmium,
there's, yes.
yeah, they're made with cadmium, tellurium, just the heaviest, most poisonous heavy metals, and they don't have half-lives. They're going to be poisonous till the end of time. Windmills create huge amounts of waste. And the waste and poison from fossil fuels is obvious, but the people's favorite thing, oh, solar and wind, they look past the fact that there is a plan to dismantle and get rid of nuclear power plants at the end of their life. And we pay into that plan every month. Every Western country has a plan for taking apart old nuclear reactors and disposing of them. There is no plan anywhere on Earth for taking apart old solar cells and recycling them. There is no plan anywhere on Earth to take apart old windmills and recycle them. There's people trying, but I'm talking about when you build a solar cell, you should have to pay up front, just like nuclear does, to get rid of the solar cell at the end of its life. Wind, when you put up a windmill, you should have to pay up front into a trust fund because what's happening now here in the United States is these windmill companies are going bankrupt and they're leaving destroyed, broken windmills sitting around. And who has to pay to dismantle them? Well, the local governments, the state governments, the federal government, or they just sit there and rot, and kill birds and kill bats and bugs. It's these things don't come without a price. Energy in modern world does not come for free. So we may as well use the most energy dense, safest form of energy there is, and that's nuclear.
Yet, even during our conversation, we are actually unwillingly spreading environmentalist propaganda because we are using the phrase nuclear waste. And yet, as far as I understand, I'm not a physicist, but I have studied physics. There is no such thing as nuclear waste because what is called nuclear waste actually is unspent nuclear fuel. And it's
Yeah.
not spent simply because we are using outdated technology that is not very efficient, the 1950 technology.
Well,
Uh,
sadly, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we've known for 70 years how to recycle nuclear waste, right? And we used to do it in the United States until Jimmy Carter made it illegal. Now, Ronald Reagan brought it back supposedly, but he gave no money to revive the recycling equipment. And so we don't recycle, but France does. France recycles all their nuclear fuel, and they do it for other countries too, like Germany and Japan. So there's we've known for since the beginning of nuclear how to reprocess nuclear waste. But they came up with this bogus idea that, oh, if you reprocess the nuclear waste, it's a proliferation problem. And some terrorists are going to break into these giant multi-billion-dollar plants and steal some plutonium without anybody noticing. It's ridiculous. The fantasies, these are called beyond design basis incidents. There's no realistic way. No one's going into Russia and stealing plutonium. No one's going into Canada and stealing plutonium. No one's going into the, reprocessing facility that used to exist around Paducah, Kentucky in the United States and scooping up shovelfuls of radioactive material. It's this myth and this super destructive channeling of all this fear, 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 when really spent nuclear fuel has got to be the greatest single energy source available to humanity. We've already mined it out of the ground. We've already processed it into metal. We've already used it once. We've already paid for it. It's sitting there and it's for free. We have billions and billions of megawatt hours of energy sitting in parking lots being unused. And then we sit around saying, oh, how do we take solar and put some batteries on it so maybe we can turn on one LED light in the middle of the night? It's that we are searching for the most complex solutions when the most available, huge, vast amount of abundant energy, more than oil. There's more reserve energy in our spent nuclear fuel than in many oil fields or natural gas fields. You know,
This was the point of our book, by the way, when history had other plans, that storing energy and using the so-called renewables means
yeah,
that there is need for storage. Storing energy is an inherently bad idea because no matter how efficient it is, you will always, just because of the laws of thermodynamics, no matter how good you get, the laws of thermodynamics will apply 1,000 years from now. And because of the laws of thermodynamics, there will always be losses. So you add complexity, you add losses, you add unreliability, you add more components. You actually go against the logic of the basic engineering, and the logic of basic engineering dictates make it simple,
yeah,
not make it complex. I mean, the words of Mikhail Kalashnikov come to my mind always in these situations. He used to say that to make something complex is simple, but to make something simple is complex.
yep,
And he
yeah,
was spot on. I don't know whether he came with this sentence, but it's spot on because it's very easy to find convoluted ways of solving a problem. It's hard to find a simple way. And nuclear is so simple, it's so amazingly simple. And
yeah,
yet, when I try to use the phrase unspent nuclear fuel instead of nuclear waste,
right.
people don't follow me. They don't understand what I'm talking about. This is the problem. The very language we use is actually constitutes propaganda and works
Yeah.
against it.
And look at Germany, spent $1 trillion on solar and wind, and now they want to spend $1 trillion on batteries. But as soon as they spend that $1 trillion, they're going to have to go and spend $1 trillion again on solar and wind because this stuff's crap. It only lasts 5 or 10 years, right? They say, oh,
And
solar
then
will last 25 years. Not a chance. At the end of 25 years, solar produces half the energy it did on day one. People don't realize solar degrades very quickly and very consistently over time. So an old solar cell is junk. Old windmills are junk. And windmills here in the Midwest of the United States are being ground into dust because guess what? It's dusty around here. And all the grain dust and dirt from farming hits those windmills at hundreds of miles an hour. And it's grinding the blades into go look at shredded windmill blades. So now they look for another solution, like super heavy duty tape that they put on windmill blades. They just keep putting band-aid after band-aid on this junk. And, because they've convinced themselves it's green. Well, what's green about using up millions of square acres of arable land, killing birds, killing turtles, destroying bats and bugs? There's nothing green about that crap technology. The only thing green about it is the money they get from tax subsidies here in the United States. So they want production tax credits, which is a joke because they don't produce shit. And so they want production tax credits for their so-called carbon-free energy, which is another lie because there's a very good chance that solar and wind never pay back their energy deficit, which means it takes more carbon energy to create a solar cell in China using slave labor and then putting it on a boat, shipping it to wherever, and then pouring concrete footings and steel frames and labor and food to feed the workers. And then they put the cells up there, and then they need endless maintenance and cleaning. There's solar cell installations that are 20 years old that have never paid back the deficit of energy it took to put them in the first place. They make energy in the worst possible way. I mean, there's no hardly vanishingly small applications for solar that make sense. Super remote locations, maybe out in the desert, but when you see people in Germany putting up solar, when they're at the top of the world, they don't even get daylight hardly, in the winter. What are they getting? 5% efficiency, 1% efficiency? it's so maddeningly insane that we've known the answer for 75 years, and it's called nuclear, right? I mean, it's like we are spitting in the face of God because he gave us the world's most energy dense fuel. And when you go get thorium, you get it with a phosphate. And we need phosphate for fertilizer. And you get rare earths with it too, which are what we make computers and starter motors and microwaves and the things of modern society. So we get the fertilizer, the materials, and the energy we need for modern society in one rock for free. I mean, how much better could it be? And yet we still insist on, like you said, adding more and more and more complexity to solve a problem that should have been solved half a century ago.
And yet, unfortunately, at the end of the day, none of this matters because you are giving facts, you are giving evidence. But we know from history that evidence and facts never mattered. Decisions, no, I'm not joking.
Yeah.
I'm not.
No, you're right. I mean, it's a rueful laugh, like, you're right.
And because at the end of the day, it all hinges on convincing enough people. There is a Japanese proverb that in a dispute, whoever shouts loudest wins.
Yeah.
And it's
Yep.
very true. So ultimately, politicians are those imposing the regulatory burden, and they want to be popular. So it doesn't matter what the facts are. They are not elected by facts. They're elected by the electorate, by everyday people. And everyday people associate nuclear energy with danger, with nuclear weapons. They imagine you may find this hard to believe, but actually I've talked many times with people about nuclear weapons, and I found out that they imagine that you could use a nuclear reactor as a nuclear weapon. And you could
Yeah,
even see this in Hollywood movies.
sure.
On top of my head, I can remember two movies where nuclear reactors were actually used as nuclear bombs. So they imagine
Yeah,
that
yeah.
this is the same thing. And these people ultimately the success of the nuclear energy depends on these people, depends on the ignorant and the public relations artists who use their ignorance. So
Yeah.
the problem is not physics, the problem is not chemistry, the problem is not engineering, the problem is ignorance and
Yep. And fear mongering.
yes. So what can be done about that?
Well, that's what we're doing right now, right? We're
Yeah,
we're trying to.
but pardon me, we are still doing it badly because all the videos about thorium and about nuclear energy get a few views, maybe
Yeah.
a few thousand at best. And the videos that are about cats or the Kardashians or Greta, whatever her name is, I don't care.
Yeah.
They get
Well,
millions of views. So they're winning this war. The ignorant are winning.
uh, I think after 15 years, public opinion is a big ship to turn around. It's very hard to turn a oil tanker around. It's very hard to turn a ship around. And so it's a slow process, but the the young generation, to their great credit, Gen Z they call them, or Gen nothing, whatever's younger than Gen Z, they didn't grow up with all the fear mongering and hand wringing, and I think the people in the baby boomer generation, people over the age of 60, who really grew up with the fear of nuclear war, and they conflated nuclear weapons with nuclear energy, and Jane Fonda and all those people with China syndrome and crap, you know, they just got fed a bunch of malarkey, as the president would say, and they, and that was the last time they thought about it. Then sometime around 1979, they thought about it for about 10 minutes. They decided it was bad. Hollywood told them it was bad. Some guy on the TV told them it was bad. They heard about a couple, nuclear incidents in the news and they just said, well, it's bad, and nobody now, I'll tell you one thing, the nuclear industry never did itself a favor because in the United States, nuclear was owned by companies that also owned coal and natural gas and these days some solar. So they always would say, oh, all of our children are beautiful, And it's like, no, that child is ugly, and that child's ugly too. But nuclear is the only beautiful child you have. And they say, oh, no, no. And, they would never defend nuclear. But now we have Constellation Energy here in the United States, which is all nuclear. And so they're doing a very good job. They've been advertising during sporting events. Like I said, the younger generation does not have a problem with nuclear power. My generation, 50-year-olds, Generation X, seems to be pretty favorable for it. So, not to be morbid, but I think the people who were most frightened into opposing nuclear are are leaving the stage, and I think we're getting to a place where the people who can defend nuclear and the young curious people are starting to understand that, hey, if you just want to be rich and you want to drive cars and fly and live life like the top 10% of the world, well, the only way you're going to do that without killing the world is with nuclear. If the there's a billion people that live like Europeans and Americans, and if we want 2 or 3 or 4 more billion people to live like that, well, good, that's nice to have ambitions. But if we want to do that, we can't do it with coal. We can't even do it with natural gas. We will kill the world if we do that. But we can totally do it with nuclear, and not just for electricity, but we can desalinate water. We can make iron with nuclear. We can make cement with nuclear. We can make, all the steel with nuclear. We can make synthetic liquid fuels to use in jets and cars and ships so that they, on net balance, use no carbon. We could recycle the carbon and close the carbon cycle. We can remediate land using nuclear. So the idea that nuclear is just about spinning a shaft and making electrons is stupid and wasteful and old thinking. The new idea with nuclear is make advanced nuclear so that it's hot enough that it can do 90% of all the things that natural gas or coal does today. So instead of making cement with natural gas, we could make it with an advanced reactor. Instead of making iron with coal, we can make it with an advanced reactor. And that is the promise of nuclear. Electricity is only 30% of the carbon problem, right? The other 70% is industrial uses. And so if we can
And
make
transportation and heating.
yeah, transportation, farming, food waste, you know, uh, if we could start, uh, you know, being better at eating the food we grow, that that is a much, much more important thing than jet engines and cars, really. It's, there's 3 times more methane released by food waste than jet engine, carbon footprint. So, so that's everyone's trying to make synthetic aviation fuel using old corn oil and stuff, which is, fine. You want to try that, go ahead. But we know how to make pure synthetic jet fuel. We just need vast amounts of heat and a little bit of electricity. Now, there's some people out there, I'm looking at it on my screen up here right now. There's people out there that are trying to do that with solar. Well, there's not enough solar to turn on lights, let alone divert solar to make jet fuel. What are you going to make a teacup of jet fuel using solar? We've got ways to make gigawatts. Imagine if we just had 4 or 5 big merchant class nuclear reactors at some of the biggest oil refineries in the world. People don't realize you burn 30% of a barrel of oil to make oil. It takes a huge amount of energy and heat and materials to make the oil. So imagine if instead of burning the oil to make the oil, we use the energy from thorium and spent nuclear fuel and uranium, and we use that energy, and now we'd instantly have 30% more oil. Think about the great good that would do for the world. Instead of burning oil to make oil, we would, fission, atoms to make heat to make oil. That right there would reduce the environmental CO2 impact of oil refineries completely, right? But environmentalists, so-called environmentalists, hate the hell out of that. They're like, no, because they've got it in their head that we need to get rid of industry. We need to get rid of prosperity. We all need to go back to living in caves, and sucking the marrow out of, the bones of antelope. I don't know what they want, you know, because everybody enjoys
Well,
having a warm house and food.
well, I think that first of all, just to mention that we may be cut off because of software issue.
We
If
got a couple minutes here. It says 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
yes, if we get cut off, we will send you another link.
All
Uh,
right.
so I think that I do know what they want. For some of them, it's just a feel-good activity. They are against nuclear and want to
Yeah.
deindustrialize the West because it sounds like a romantic idea. They feel
Yep.
good to talk about it and all that. But for others, it's actually a profession. And if nuclear is implemented, the environmentalist movement will become redundant.
Yep.
They will lose the reason to exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they have a vested interest that the global warming will not be solved. I mean, sounds
Absolutely.
like a conspiracy theory, and yet it's very logical because uh, all these movements, at least their leadership, the people who make careers out of it, they want their livelihood to continue, not to lose it. So nuclear, of course, is damaging to them because nuclear will solve the global warming completely,
Right.
especially given that it's the cheapest form of energy.
Well, and to that end, here, I'm a pretty America-centric guy, but I think the argument could be made throughout the world is that I don't, I'll put it forward, I understand global warming and the effects and the Anthropocene effect, all that stuff. But who cares, right? Let's forget all that. That's not the reason you do nuclear. You do nuclear for opportunities to use materials better, for energy independence, for national security, to create jobs, give these people who have no meaning in their life and they find meaning in destroying industry and destroying our society, right? These environmentalists want to tear down society. They don't want to build it up, right? Because they see all the success, our lifespans, our health, all the things, all the great things that have happened in the last couple of hundred years on the backs of coal and fossil. We don't want to get rid of that. We just want to get rid of where the energy comes from.
With thorium, we could eat the cake and keep it. Is this a fair summary?
Yeah, I think that's, people kind of get into the too good to be true situation there, but I'm not saying anything that isn't easily verifiable. I mean, the most important thing about thorium to me right now is to emphasize that we can get all this material, this thorium material, for free from the processing of rare earths and phosphate fertilizers. Now, we process phosphate fertilizers all the time here in the US and Europe and Africa and other places, but we throw away the rare earths because they come with thorium and a little bit of uranium. So if we could get over, and why do we do that? We do that for purely human-made stupid reasons, right? It's just too hard to deal with the regulatory burden of these source materials, which is, which is artificial. There's no other reason, right? It's not technically hard to do. And the Chinese do it every day. And 100% of all rare earths come from China, right? You can see numbers from like, oh, high 80s, high 90s. And I'm here to tell you 100% of all usable rare earths and rare earth magnets and rare earth metal comes from China and nowhere else, right?
And the
And
Chinese
so if we
were
want to,
also the ones who started to develop thorium reactors.
yeah, well, redevelop them, I guess. But
Redevelop them, yes.
yeah.
So
But
I'm beginning
I'll
to
just say,
wonder.
like, we get the when you make phosphates, you get rare earths, and when you get rare earths, you get thorium, and so you get the thorium for free. Like the people are mining these materials from iron mines, titanium rutile mines, phosphate mines. So they're being lifted out of the ground, which is one of the most expensive parts. Then they're being digested for other materials. Somebody wants the iron, somebody wants the titanium, somebody wants the phosphate. So they're already separated to a certain extent, for something else. So you're getting that for free. Now, if we just take that separation a little further and break it down into elements like NdPr, like that's what we need for rare earth magnets for our cars and windmills, if you want to use that for stuff. but but if you get that, you're going to automatically get a lot of thorium and uranium, which you should want because you're getting it for free. You're not, it's not a uranium mine, it's not a thorium mine, it's a side stream byproduct. So that's actually what we're trying to do right now. The Thorium Energy Alliance is in the process of trying to license the ability to take thorium from rare earth processors. And we want to enable rare earth processing in the United States. We want to be the receivers of that thorium, and we've spent a long time with the United States regulator to explain that, we won't just be building up a stockpile of thorium, that there's many uses for it. There's many off takers for it. People around the world need this, very badly. So that's a little bit long explanation, but the takeaway is you get thorium for free, which is a miracle, considering all the things it can do.
Yeah, but this is not what the regulator will hear. The regulator is a politically appointed body that has to please the powers that be. And first of all, when you tell them that something is for free, they couldn't care less because it's not their money.
Yeah, yeah.
So you again, you are giving them facts, you are giving them logic and evidence, and none of this is matters at the end of the day. At the end of the day, they will regulate whatever is popular to regulate. And the popular assumption is that what you want to do actually is to proliferate nuclear materials that could lead to radioactive contamination and to spreading of nuclear weapons and all that. And you want them to open a can of worms and to please their masters and to please the public, which is the same thing in a democracy, more or less. They will, if I'm correct, they will say no.
Well,
Just to have an
I
easy
have
life.
two easy solutions for you. Uh, uh, they are mostly USA centric, so I'll preface it with that. But in the USA, the NRC is what's known as a single mandate agency. And that is a horrible thing. Their single mandate is safety, right? Now, if you're 100% safe, you're 0% innovative, right? And so they just are like, we don't even want to do what we're doing now. Doing nothing is the safest thing we could be doing,
Yeah,
but
sure.
we are forced to let you do some of this stuff, but we're going to make you do it exactly the way you've always done it for like the last 70 years. An agency like the FAA, the agency that controls the design of airplanes and the approval of airplanes and safety, for how planes fly and interact. They have a dual mandate of safety and innovation, right? So they have to balance it. The Security and Exchange Commission has a dual mandate. The you know the all, almost every agency has at least two mandates, and they kind of fight each other. So they knew what they were doing when they put the NRC as a single mandate. They knew that would hobble the industry forever. So if we just added a second mandate, you need to be as safe as you can while also providing reliability and innovation. That's all they need to say, and 1,000 flowers would bloom. Now, more specific to what I want and what we fight for, very simply, is thorium and uranium and plutonium are regulated as nuclear fuel in the United States. And because of that, most of the world, just follows what the US does. Now, that's one metric. Can thorium be used as a fuel? Sure. Can uranium be used as a fuel? Sure. But thorium has thousands of other uses, whereas uranium has almost no other use. Plutonium has almost no other use, right? So we are saying thorium needs to be in its own category. So thorium is a nuclear fuel, and it's a critical material, and it's uh, acts like a rare earth metal, and it acts like a refractory metal, and it acts like a platinum group metal. It's got so many properties beyond just that it can be used as a fuel. Uranium and plutonium, because they can be made into weapons, go ahead, put those in, boxes behind fences with dogs and guys with big guns. Thorium is not like that and should not be regulated like that. And yet, if you work with thorium today, you have to act as if it can be made into a weapon with big fences and 3-foot thick walls and armed guards with big guns and mean dogs. It's insane. It's just a metal it's a mild alpha emitter, and we have to get away. We have to become mature, or else we're never going to take advantage of it. Well, who is going to take advantage of it is China,
Yeah,
and
The
that's the
China is
boogeyman in the
already
room.
on the road of getting advantage of it.
Yeah,
You said insane, as though if it's insane, it cannot possibly be allowed to happen. And as somebody who has worked as a lawyer for 17 years, I know something about bureaucracies, and I can tell you that insane doesn't matter for bureaucracies. They could do insane stuff forever, because a bureaucrat is paid by the hour. And a bureaucrat doesn't like changes. Never mind what his mandate is. This is again theoretical. At the end of the day, a bureaucrat wants an easy life. An easy life means to copy paste the same thing again and again, because the moment he stops copy pasting, two things happen. First, he has to think for himself, to take responsibility, to take risks.
yeah.
And also he has to work.
Well,
And
we say here in the United States, we always say no one ever got fired for saying no, right?
okay, yes,
You get
same
fired for
logic,
saying
by the way.
yes.
But this is all over the world. I
Yeah,
wasn't a lawyer in the United States. I was a lawyer in Eastern Europe, and the logic was exactly this. They were always looking for ways to copy paste
yep,
whatever they were doing. And the moment you came with something innovative, it doesn't matter what it was about. I didn't come with innovative stuff when it came to nuclear materials. I came with innovative stuff when it came to
yeah.
new legal arguments. And immediately I was hated, and immediate because I was taking them out of the easy life. I was taking them out of the safety zone. They had to think and to take risks and to come with something that to do something that they haven't done before. They hate this. They want to do. Every bureaucrat wants to do whatever his colleague is doing and whatever all his colleagues have been doing for years.
I will, yeah,
It's
we
like
used
a
to joke,
tradition.
yeah, we used to joke that there used to be a book uh about negotiating called How to Get to Yes. And we would joke that some of these people read another books called How to Get to Know. And but I will give you a little bit of optimism here. The reason we continue to do this work after 15 years is that we do continue to make progress. And so where thorium used to be specifically not fundable, like the United States government would not fund research in thorium, they realized that the reasons for that prohibition against funding thorium research were not well founded, and so they're changing that policy. So now there's money available to do research with thorium for material and fuels and things like that. So it's so that's a big change, and that's a sign of that there are some brave people in the USA bureaucracy, some insightful people that are willing to take a chance, uh, you know, uh, but to your point, absolutely, your average person says, well, I've got a pension coming and I just need to work for, 5 or 6 more years and I get money for the rest of my life. And why would I rock the boat? Rocking the boat is a way to fall out of the boat, and so they just want to, a lot of people just want to toe the company line. But, we have found, so as an optimistic, thing to, talk about is that there are some regulators and policymakers and researchers in the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that are starting to realize that this has been an unfairly ignored area of topic research and discussion that they should have been funding thorium. Now they're going to. So I'll
Uh,
let you know how it goes. We've actually put in a funding request ourselves. So we'll see if and the funding request is to uh, bring back and revive the ability to make thoriated alloys like your tungsten welding rod that we were talking about earlier. A lot of that skill has been lost. So it's very well known that you can make thorchrome and magnathor and thoriated copper and thoriated tungsten and things like that, but very few people know how to do it anymore. And on top of that, the last time they did it was probably 60 years ago. So we have much better techniques now. And so we'll see if we get funding for that or if other people get funding for, and I'll let you know.
I suppose that the Thorium Alliance perhaps achieved something way more important. Uh, the Thorium Alliance, by putting thorium on the radar, got the Chinese interested.
Oh,
I suspect
yeah.
that your activity played a role there. I don't know for sure because everything is so secretive in a totalitarian state, but the Chinese always
Yeah.
do. The Soviet Union was like this. The Soviet Union would always start developing a technology if they knew that the Americans are considering this technology. They were always trying to mimic. And
Yeah.
if the Chinese develop this technology, the West will have two options: either to fall behind economically, severely, or to develop thorium energy on its own. So
Yeah.
maybe you started the ball rolling, although not necessarily in the United States, but through China.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. Some of the early forums that we had discussing, thorium and its uses were pretty, it was just a bunch of guys that stumbled into it. And yeah, you're probably right. We're gonna have to find out whether that's a good thing that we created a competition with an adversary, or whether we just signed our own fate to wind up buying yet more technology from a country that doesn't always have our best interest at heart, which is a nice way to put it. So yeah, I think part of it is I think that, you know, I tend to fall on the side that if China's doing it, eventually the US, if not other countries, are going to have to respond and understand that, China is going to use this new technology as a civilian reactor that they can give away around the world because it doesn't make bombs. It makes very little waste, and the spent nuclear fuel it does make can be reprocessed pretty easily because it's a liquid chemistry, which makes it much easier than solid fuel rods to reprocess. And so they're going to go around to Brazil and Indonesia and Egypt and Nigeria and India, and they're going to go around the world and give these reactors away for free. And they're going to run them, and they're going to basically say, "Don't worry, just give us some land. We'll build the reactor. We'll send our people to run them." So no one's going to learn how to run reactors. No one's going to learn how to build reactor. No one's going to know how to maintain a reactor. All they're going to get is energy, which is good and it's valuable. And these countries will be very grateful that China brought them energy, but they'll be paying rent to China for the next 100 years, right? Because once you build a reactor, it's going to run for 100 years. So it's going to be 100 years before Europe or the USA can ever have a chance to go in to some place like South Africa and say, "Hey, what about us?" And they'll say, "No, thanks. We asked you for help for 50 years and you didn't do a thing for us. So now China came in, brought a reactor on a boat and plugged it into our grid, and voila, we got 100 new megawatts overnight. And they got 6 more boats coming for free, and all we have to do is pay them, 6 cents a kilowatt hour, and we'll get all the energy we ever needed." So it would be a shameful and horrible missed opportunity. Uh, I think we still have some time, but we are losing the hearts and minds of people around the world who deserve energy. The poor people of the world, don't want to be energy poor. And energy is the number one metric to measure whether a country is wealthy or poor, right? Rich countries have a lot of energy, poor countries have almost no energy. And we need to fix that. And if we're going to fix it, like India and China are burning probably twice as much coal in the last couple of years and than they were just a couple of years ago. And they can't continue that trend. It's not healthy for them. It's not good for the earth. So if we want to raise 1 billion people out of energy poverty, we need to go around the world and give them ultra safe, inherently safe, energy efficient, non-proliferating nuclear power and let them decide what they want to do with that. Do they want to get into iron? Do they want to make water, desalinate water? Do they want to make fertilizer? Do they want to make liquid fuels? There's so much that they can do if we put molten salt reactor technology in particular and other high temperature reactors around the world and ran them mostly on thorium and spent nuclear fuel, you know, it would be the greatest thing we could ever do for ourselves. It'd be the most self-interested thing we could ever do. And in Europe doesn't like all these migrants and immigrants coming. United States, a big part of our election was people with no hope and no opportunity flooding across our borders. Why don't we if we gave all these countries hope and opportunities, people would stay home and build their own. No one wants to leave home, you know? So let's give them opportunities and they'd be very grateful, and, we would eliminate wars and there'd be peace and rainbows and flying unicorns with love. I mean, maybe not flying unicorns with love, but economic prosperity would certainly be good for a lot of things, and that's why I talk about national security more than I talk about greenhouse gases and things like that. I think that's what really drives when you talk about jobs and security and abundance, that moves a lot more hearts and minds than talking about, carbon sequestration and, greenhouse gases and things like that.
Carbon sequestration. Uh, One last question, John. Let's assume that miraculously the red tape is gone.
Mm-hmm.
So how much money and how much time you need, assuming that somebody funds you,
Well, I'm an optimist.
how much time and how much money you would need to get to the point where you could churn uh, thorium reactors on an assembly line and ship them around the world?
I think somebody like Natural Resources in the United States or Curio um, in the eastern part of the United States, uh, Copenhagen Atomics. I think Copenhagen Atomics in particular is very, very far down the road of having a test reactor. Uh, I am more optimistic than some of these reactor developers. I think if we decided this was like World War II or a moonshot or the Manhattan
Yeah,
Project,
let's assume that
yeah,
this is the new Manhattan project and that you will get the funding. So how many billions of dollars and how long?
I think you could build a factory to make these things for $1 billion. And I think uh, and this is based on these technology vendors' own numbers, so I'm not just making it up, but I'm basing it on what they say and some of the economic proof I've seen that you could deploy 1 gigawatt deployments of nuclear power from an advanced molten salt reactor for 1 penny a megawatt thermal and 2 cents a megawatt electric. Now, everyone likes to talk about electric, but I think the thermal part's more exciting because if you've got 1 penny a megawatt thermal energy, you can still pay for that energy by metering the BTUs. So people make plenty of money, even at a penny. But a penny would allow you to make hydrogen for about 45 cents a kilogram. Now, the holy grail of hydrogen is $1 a kilogram. That's what you can buy hydrogen for in the Gulf Coast of the USA. That's the cheapest hydrogen on planet Earth. $1 a kilogram. If you could break $1 a kilogram, you wouldn't make hydrogen from methane, right? Because it'd be uneconomic. You wouldn't do
Yes,
it
you could
because
make it
it's
from water.
green. Yeah, you wouldn't do it because it's green. You wouldn't do it because you want to feel good. You wouldn't want to do it because you don't want to drill a hole in the ground. No, you're greedy. You want to do it because you're going to make more money, right? And so we use 45 cent a kilogram
Really is good.
hydrogen. Now we can make liquid fuels that are cheaper and better than fuel from fossil sources. We can make ammonia that's better and cheaper than ammonia that comes from fossil sources. I mean, that is my optimistic vision is 1 penny a kilowatt thermal energy from a nuclear reactor would be a game changer. And that's where the headwinds are going to come from, are people who want to keep doing things the same old way. And but I'm telling you, uh, once somebody realizes that this is a better way to make a lot more money, they're not going to do it because they think the grass will be greener or the trees will bloom brighter or the happy bunnies will jump across the lawn. They're going to do it because they want a gold-plated yacht and a bunch of girls in bikinis and a Caribbean island, and that's
Or,
fine. I don't care what
or,
motivates them.
or a bunch of boys in bikini.
Well, yeah, or
Yeah,
I should be
of course.
even. I should be level-headed, and or equal opportunity. But
Okay, so it's $1 billion, only a billion. That's a very low sum, by the way.
yeah,
And how long
I
to
think
make
uh,
the factory?
I think if you want to, do all this, I think if somebody said that today and said, "Hey, here we are. You can have all the nuclear fuel you need. Build a nuclear capable reactor test it for a year to figure out where your problems are, and then spend another year, making the final design changes. And while you're doing that, build the factory. So you're two tracking it, you're testing and building at the same time. I don't see why you couldn't have a factory in 3 years, so 2028. And I don't see why you couldn't have a test rig running by 2026, test it for a year. So the end of 2027, you have, your design tweaked and worked out. And by 2028, you should be able to start building the first couple commercial units, see how those work. But by 2029, 2030, you should be able to deploy, and this is key, you should be able to deploy a 1 gigawatt factory every month, right? And that is not even the scale we need. We need to be putting out 1 gigawatt factory every week if we want to move the needle. Now, people say, oh, that's insane. But China builds a nuclear power. I mean, God help me, I wish they would. But China builds a coal plant every week. In the last 20 years, China has built 1,000 coal plants. That's 50 a year for 20 years. They have 1,000 coal plants. We have 3,000 power plants in the United States. Europe has a similar number. So the idea of building thousands of plants is absolutely doable. We did it before. Our forefathers did it before. We have 1,000 coal plants in the United States that have substations and workers and water and rail and fences and guards and roads and towns that need the power. We could repower 1,000 coal plants in the United States with small nuclear reactors, and we would instantly be more profitable, more stable, better reliability, and as a bonus, we'd be greener and cleaner and more energy efficient on top of all that. Plus, we would be able to do so much more than just spin a shaft and make electrons. We could use the heat to make all the things we need for modern society: iron, cement, fertilizer, nuclear medicines, plastics, liquid fuels, all the good things we need to live even better lives than we live today. And we have pretty good lives. We could live even yet better lives if we just turned all the coal plants of the world into nuclear power plants.
Thank you, John. That's what should be remembered. Only $1 billion and only 3 years, which is
I think so.
Nothing in terms of
$1 billion
time, nothing
for
in
the
terms of money.
factory, $1 billion for the machine. That's nothing. That's the advertising budget for a Ford Fiesta.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much for this enlightening conversation, John.
I appreciate the opportunity. And if anybody wants to learn more, they can go to thoriumenergyalliance.com. And we have all sorts of information there, resources, historical resources, and a sort of our own Wikipedia page that describes all the uses for thorium and where it came from and who discovered it. So it's a good resource. And I hope you visit the site and see what we have to offer the world. And I really appreciate you very much taking an interest in this and allowing me to speak with you. So onward and upward, let's get this done.
Let's do our part. Well, I'm doing my part, not so much with the YouTube channel, but with the book, hopefully.
Good.
Because in the book we had a chapter which says which is called "More Environmentalism, More CO2." So we make the case that environmentalism increases the CO2 levels. And the argument is centered around nuclear, that nuclear is the only way to solve the global warming. And the environmentalists do their best to prevent nuclear from taking over.
You said it. That is the truth, brother. Well, let's fix that. We can do it. Thank you very much.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.